Okay, today we're going to be talking about self-determination theory, which is a theory that describes essentially how people can essentially live to their potential, be happy and feel as if they are a fully functioning person, similar to what Rogers talked about. And according to this theory, there are three needs, basic needs that people need to have satisfied in order to be fulfilled. One is a need for autonomy, so that's like self-determination, be able to decide what you want to do, what you want to do with your life. Competence, to be able to do the things that you would like to be able to do. And relatedness, this is your how your interactions with others, your relationships with other people. But we're going to focus on the autonomy aspect here in this discussion. Okay. Basically, actions that are self-determined are done because the person doing that action values that action. It's an intrinsic value. So this is not something that anybody is pressuring you to do. This is something that you want to do. You really want to do these actions. Okay, so anything that you do simply because you enjoy doing it, that would be an example of a self-determined action. And those are actions that you're typically going to spend more time on in your life. Controlled actions are the ones that you do to satisfy some kind of an external pressure. So, for example, it could be that pressure could be a reward that you might be getting. Sometimes, if you're doing something because you're just getting a reward for it, it'd be like me teaching just because I'm getting a paycheck. That's not really the reason why I'm teaching. I wouldn't consider my actions completely controlled as a result of that. Partially controlled, but not completely. Realize that the rewards you get can undermine how much intrinsic interest you have in the activity. And this has actually been shown. There's been research showing among children that when children are essentially told that they're going to be paid, given some kind of reward for playing with these particular toys, they actually spent less time playing with those toys than children who were not told they were going to get a reward. And apparently getting a reward means, essentially tells the child, well, I'll just play with that to get the reward and that's it. They didn't take any intrinsic interest in what they're doing. However, sometimes rewards can be helpful for you if the rewards tell you how you're doing. So in other words, if you get a bonus because of especially good work that you do, then you value that because the bonus tells you how you're doing. If you just get a pay raise that's a standard pay raise that everybody else gets, it doesn't really connect with you and doesn't really, it can actually undermine the value you do for your activity, the value you have for your activities. A lot of our behaviors have extrinsic motives. So these, in other words, we have motives that are coming from outside of us that are guiding our behavior. At one level of this would be external regulation. So this is the highest level of extrinsic external control. Basically, you are entirely controlled by external constraints. You could be either being coerced into doing this activity, or it could be something that you're doing, you really dislike doing, but you're doing it solely for the reward. So if you have a job that you absolutely hate, but you're doing that job because of the reward you get, the paycheck, and if you had the choice, you wouldn't do it at all, then that behavior is externally regulated. Behavior that is based on introjected regulation is kind of like a lesser level of external control here. There's still some degree of external control, but it's based on your own feelings of what is right and wrong, what you should and ought to be doing. So in other words, you're still engaging in the behavior. If you, for example, working at a job, you may not like the job, but you feel that it is important for you to be working. You doing it by choice, but you're realizing that it's not in your control, it's somebody else's control. But you're really doing it because you'd feel guilty if you were just staying home doing nothing. And you're doing it to get self-approval. You feel proud of yourself for actually having this job, even though you don't really like doing it. So you've sort of partially internalized the value of doing what you're doing. You don't really like it, but you know you should be doing it, so you're comfortable with that. At the next level of external regulation, kind of a lower level again, is identified regulation. Now it goes beyond just doing something you don't like to do. The behavior you're doing now actually has personal meaning for you. So now you are really choosing to do this. You've chosen the job you're doing. You're not pressuring yourself to do this, but you are consciously choosing to do this. The rewards you get for doing it are consistent with your goals and values. So you're not essentially, what I'm looking for is like you're not really going against your personal values, violating your personal values by doing this. It's consistent with your personal values. So you have no feeling of inconsistency. You're doing the job. You know it's important. You've come to have developed meaningful. You'll come to see the work you're doing is meaningful. But really, again, it's coming from outside. You didn't do this because you wanted to do it. You did it because you needed to have this job. Okay? So it's not quite as self-determined here as intrinsically motivated behavior. But you like doing it. It has meaning for you. And you've certainly chosen this. Okay? So you've more or less identified with this more or less forced choice that you had. And therefore it's no longer forced, but it did come from outside. Finally, integrated regulation. This is the highest, or rather I should say, this is the highest level of self-determination and the lowest level of external regulation. Integrated regulation means even if this is behavior that you may have started out as more or less being forced to do it, it's you doing it because you know you ought to do it, but now beyond that you've identified with it. Again, that's the identified regulation. But here you now are incorporating what you're doing, the behavior, as part of your self-concept. So not only do you find the work you're doing meaningful, if we're going back to that job analogy, now you see this as your career. You see this as part of who you are. Sort of like me being a college professor. Maybe I started out as a college professor because I was forced to do it for some reason. Maybe I needed to get a job and this is what I was qualified for and I got it. Didn't really like being a college professor, but here I am, I'm doing it. Okay, let's assume that that's how I began. If that's how I began, then at that point it's external regulation. Now, let's say I'm working as a college professor. I still don't really like what I'm doing, but I know it's something that I should be doing and I ought to be doing. And I ought to do a good job because that's what I'm supposed to do. And I don't quit because I feel guilty, I feel ashamed. So I do this and I know that people are proud of me for being a professor, so I continue to do this. Again, the control is not coming from inside, it's coming from outside. Let's say years down the road, I decide that being a professor really has personal meaning for me. The work that I do is meaningful. I choose to go into work every day. I don't feel pressured to do it. I'm completely comfortable doing it. I feel that the work I do is consistent with my own goals. Okay? And that would be an example of identified regulation. But now, integrated regulation, now I see myself. I am a professor. That is not just what I do. That is who I am. It becomes integrated into my self-concept. So that's the highest level of self-determination. It still comes from outside. It still is something that maybe it once started out as something I was forced to do. But it is something that I consider an important part of who I am as as a person. And I see this as something that I'm freely choosing to do. Okay? However, I realize that it's still behavior that is not, it's essentially instrumental. In other words, you're doing it in order to get something in return. But you don't see this as an unpleasant thing that you're forced to do. Okay? So you have a high sense of choice. Again, there might be, I don't know, in the homework, some of you may have found these differences to be a little bit confusing. But hopefully that clarifies them. Briefly talking about the need for relatedness. It's an intrinsic need. We have a need to connect with others. And again, that others, we want to be able to get unconditional acceptance. Remember, we talked about unconditional positive regard when we're talking about Carl Rogers. And it's not based on pressure. But it also is not in conflict with autonomy. We still want to control our own lives, but we do want to be able to connect with others. And so they're not two opposite things. Now, parents can help their children become more leaning toward self-determination. Again, the idea, I think, behind this theory is that self-determination is a good thing. We want to be able to be autonomous, make our own decisions, choose our own pathways in life. And again, very similar to what Rogers was talking about, too, with self-actualization, reaching your potential, becoming the best you can be. Parents can provide conditional negative regard, where they kind of punish you when you don't comply with their expectations. And of course, that can lead to resentment. And that's really a very highly controlling environment that a child is growing up in. So I don't think as a parenting strategy that's necessarily what DC would recommend as consistent with this theory. Conditional positive regard, that's better, but not necessarily the best. Remember, again, what Carl Rogers talked about conditional positive regard, where you're getting the affection and the love as long as you are complying with the expectations. So if the parents essentially are showering their children with conditional positive regard, where they are only, more or less, they're only valued if they comply with what the parents expect, unfortunately the child is going to not have a sense of autonomy. They're essentially just engaging in ways to just satisfy mommy and daddy. And again, your motivation essentially becomes controlled or introduced. So in other words, if mommy and daddy have high expectations for you for particular behaviors, you're essentially going to say, I'm doing it because that's what my mommy and daddy want to do. You're okay doing it, you're comfortable doing it, but you're not doing it by any personal choice whatsoever. Now, on the other hand, parents can try to develop their children's sense of autonomy, promote autonomy. So, what the parents need to be able to frequently do is to take the child's perspective. And when parents have various behaviors that they enjoy doing, show the children how much they value the activities that they do, and demonstrate the importance of having an intrinsic value for the behaviors you do. So you want to promote in your children, do something that is meaningful to you. Okay? Now the parental expectations will still be there, but the encouragement is that the child chooses to take those expectations. Nothing implicit. They don't have to choose those expectations. Parents will still love you if you do it. But in other words, it's sort of like me being a professor. I love being a professor. My children, I don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to become musicians? Are they going to become car salespeople? Are they going to become, I don't know, are they going to be work in a factory? I don't know what my children are going to do. But it would certainly make me happy if my children became college professors. I certainly wouldn't force them to do it. I wouldn't expect them to do it. But, they would see how much I love doing what I'm doing. And if they chose that, essentially I would support them. And essentially based on how much I love what I do. And in other words, they would value it. Seeing how much I love it, they would value it as well. Kind of becomes more or less identified or integrated. They're internalizing, what I love, and they're internalizing it for themselves. Okay. So again, the child now can choose to follow parents' expectations without feeling like they have to follow that. All right, we'll stop there, and next time we will talk a little bit about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs as leading to that self-actualization. So we'll talk about his definition as well.